We want to thank the Georgetown Day School for, in addition to educating Henry and many of our children, for providing us yet again an opportunity to show how technologically incompetent some of us are. Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for coming for this celebration to remember and honor Margaret. I'm Josh Gottbaum. Margaret was a friend of mine, but that's actually not the reason I'm here. The reason I'm here is that the obvious person to be here, Woody Landy, said, I can't talk about Margaret for more than 5 minutes without breaking down. And so, as a result, I was volunteered, proving there is a role for emotionally repressed males. Now, this is obviously a really sad, a tragic occasion. Margaret left way too soon, and in a way that left all of us bereft, unprepared. But if all this was about tragedy, then it probably would not be worth forcing Stuart and Henry and Emily to get together and have to listen to another 150 people say how sorry they are at their loss. So the real reason we are here is to celebrate. It's to celebrate a joyous, smart, passionate spouse, sister, mother, colleague, and friend. Wonderful person. We hope that this celebration will be a bit of comfort to Stuart and Emily. And it's already proved to be a bit of a reunion as a reminder of the magnet that Margaret was, of all of the networks of friends that she created, of all the communities of which she was a member. So the organization of this celebration is, of course, that there will be people who will talk about Margaret, her friends, her sister, and Stuart. And in addition, there will be music. Now, music was a source of great passion and great division in Margaret's and Stuart's lives. Because, and as a result, in this program, we have conveniently arranged for both Margaret's music and Stuart's music. We will start and end with Margaret's music. And in the middle, we will have Stuart's music, which, by the way, Margaret would have been perfectly fine with, except it required sitting in concert halls and sitting still. And that was something of which she was not capable. As Stuart explained it to me, on the occasions when he was able to drag her to the concert hall, she would spend her time, instead of listening to the music, counting the lights, figuring out the percentage of empty seats, etc. So we will have some of the music that she would have loved, but for its venue. Sorry, Jane. We will start with her music. This is On the Street Where You Live, which was a song that Margaret not only loved, but sang to her kids. And it has been being performed by 4 of Henry's friends. It was arranged by Eric Frederickson, a friend of Henry's. And he is joined by Tim Bolton, Adam Gottbaum, and Jordan Gottbaum, who are here entirely coincidentally.
I have often walked down this street before, but the pavement always stayed beneath my feet before. All at once am I several stories high, knowing I'm on the street where you live. Are there daffodils in the heart of town? Can you hear a lark in any other part of town? Does enchantment pour out of every door? No, it's just on the street where you live. And all the towering feeling, just to know somehow you are near. The overpowering feeling that any second you may suddenly appear. People stop and stare, they don't bother me, for there's nowhere else on earth that I would rather be. Let the time go by, I won't care if I can be here on the street where you live.
Dorcas? Yes. We're now hearing from Dorcas Atkins, a neighbor on Albemarle for decades. Please.
I'll start with a little poem I wrote. I think it's the only time I've ever written a poem for anybody.
Talk loud.
Can you hear me now? Okay. It's boltweed, you said. It's so pretty, I said. It's invasive, you said. I looked. It was. Our gardens had merged. Side by side, the fence long removed. For 32 years, we pearled morning glories, side by side as our hair turned gray. Now boltweed and rabbits had found us, and age, and your new wild hope. You moved to the desert. I went to sea. No wet basement, I thought. No neighbors either, I thought. But I saw your laugh, and I knew it was right. You made art all day. Under the Black Mesa, you gathered dry dung for a garden, Rio Grande chuckling alongside, a garden you will never till. My friendship with Margaret was different than any I've ever formed. It was based not only on common interests and affection, but importantly, on proximity. Our houses sat 4 strides apart. In the early years, when we lived without central air, our windows open, we hollered to one another. We knew when the other was awake or asleep. We established unruly gardens side by side with 2 hives of bees on the property line between them. When one of us went out to pull weeds, the other often joined her. casual facts interchanged, the ubiquitous morning glories providing impetus to our meetings. As neighbors do, I took Margaret for granted, as I took the abundant, luxuriant growth of her daffodils, zinnias, and lilies. Our families, like our gardens, grew up side by side. I knew Margaret could see inside our house and would intervene if my children invited a rowdy crowd over in our absence. They, as well as we, counted on Margaret to come and complain to them before calling the police. Margaret was fearless on confronting youngsters experimenting with the limits, whether they were our own children or truants from Wilson High School across the street. We fed and walked each other's pets. Later, she and Stuart enchanted my grandchild, letting him play with their huge tub of wooden trains. He learned Margaret's name as early as he learned mine. She was generous with her time and her art, contributing fantastic crepe paper beasts to decorate the empty storefront at Best Buy for Tenleytown's infant art scene. She loved to cook for friends, and her flower-filled back garden was the setting for countless happy gatherings on steamy summer nights. I assumed, childlike, that she and Stuart would always be there, filling the air with his haunting flute melodies and her cheerful holler when leaving each morning for work. Bye, babes. I love you. When I began to hear their wish to move to New Mexico, Stuart's early home, I told myself they'd never do it. Eventually, while we were away last summer, they did. We returned to see the curtains blowing from an empty window. No furniture inside. Over the months, I tried to accept this. On a trip to New Mexico last fall, we found their beautiful adobe house with nobody home. As they had done here, they had left the door unlocked. What did we do? We walked through the rooms and saw the table I had built, the plates I had thrown, all in this new place. New art seemed to be everywhere. Margaret had found her true home. More acceptance bloomed in me. Now that she has left us, I feel not only her loss, but also gratitude for her final months. She had wanted this life more than I knew, and she had been right. Thank you, Margaret and Stuart, for following your hearts when you couldn't have known how important it was to have done so.
I could announce the next group as the Columbia String Quartet, but there's a ringer. Dave Lubavitch, in the spot normally occupied by the first violin. It was Stuart's flute teacher. So without further ado, Patricia Stewart, that was yours. Our next speaker has known Margaret since middle school in India. Mary Clark.
How's that? Can everyone hear?
Yes.
Better? I don't think I'll ever be ready to talk at Margaret's memorial. We had game planned everything. We had told each other stories from when we were young girls about how it was all going to go. And the next part was supposed to be when we were widows and had lost half our minds and were living in some ramshackle house in New England, playing Scrabble and not eating vegetables and probably taking up smoking again. So this feels way too soon. Margaret roared into my life 45 years ago when we were both living in India. She'd lived there for a long time, and I was a newcomer. First day of school, had the very bad judgment to sit in her chair in English class, which was just not done. And so she came in and came up to the chair and just stood there very politely, didn't say anything. And I got the message and I got up and moved. Even then, she had that kind of presence. It was extraordinary at 15, 16. She just ruled her world. Is Eric Holtz here? You're here. Do you mind if I tell the story you wrote about so beautifully? It dovetails perfectly with mine. Eric remembers being in grammar school and a new kid on the block and being bullied mercilessly in the play yard, in the schoolyard. And Margaret stood up. She just jumped up and told all the kids to shut up and stop it right then. And they did. She had this sort of presence and she had character, and it came from some deep wellspring. And it was to serve her whole life, which was an extraordinary life, an unusual life. We read Hamlet that year, and I decided she was like Ophelia, and in high school she was like Ophelia, tall and statuesque, with madcap hair, blonde ringlets, more often than not barefoot, up to the elbows, silver bangles, toes, rings on her toes. She seemed ethereal and from another world, but she also aced all her classes and was liked by everybody. The girls kind of wanted to be her, and the boys all wanted to be with her. We left India a couple days apart. She back to Texas for her senior year. Can you imagine having spent all those years in India, and suddenly she's back in Texas for her senior year? I wonder what they thought of that. I wonder if they survived Margaret. A couple of days later, I went through Heathrow Airport by myself on my way to somewhere, and there was a board, and I passed by, and there was my name on a piece of paper folded in half. And it was Margaret's. Now please remember, this is not the crazy world of instant communication that we now live in. But Margaret had somehow decided to write a letter and figured I'd find it. And so she just stabbed a note into a bulletin board in Heathrow. And somehow it all worked out. I got it. We hadn't had the presence of mind to swap addresses, so fortunately I knew where to find her in Texas. College came, and grad school, trying to find our footing with a new career. She a lawyer, I became a journalist. Boys came, boys went. But we had a plan for our lives. And I came home from some trip, some far-flung place, some awful disaster, and found, to my horror, Margaret in love, which I hadn't expected. And this time, it really stuck because it was true. I watched Margaret and Stuart in DC, the year of the periodic cicadas. What, it happens every 17 years? That's way out of my knowledge wheelhouse. And they lovingly placed carcasses in each other's hair. I was dismayed. I didn't know of the mythology of the periodic cicada with its carefree living and immortality. But Margaret had found her true love, and it was to change her life forever. Stuart gave Margaret her first consistent home. It was a home that never changed. He gave her unconditional love, and he delighted in every unusual aspect of our beloved Margaret. And it was then that Margaret really came into her own and was able to be everything from an FAA lawyer writing complex contracts to doing lifestyle installations in and around town. Monarch butterflies handmade by the thousands. But I often think of the children that came from this amazing, extraordinary union of these two really unusual people. Of Emily and Henry, who I always thought she viewed more as life-sized installations of art than children. And I think that's why they have grown up to be so extraordinary. And I want to say to them today that Margaret's life force, her breath, shaped you and formed you, surrounds you like a field force, and it will never be extinguished. When they decided to move to New Mexico, I was a little concerned. I didn't quite get it. I knew Margaret needed space. I don't think she felt that her time was short, but I think she felt her time had come. And so, as many of you know, they moved in August of last year. She apparently dug up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bulbs, crocus and daffodils and paper whites. You know, they drove across the country to New Mexico, and she carried those bulbs with her, and she planted each and every one of them. And they're going to come up this spring, although she will not rise again. Her life came to an end on a starry night, a New Year's Eve, which is so Margaret, how perfect, how storybook. A night that Stuart tells me was of dancing and of joy. She had just painted her studio. I call it cerulean blue. Stuart corrects me that it's Pueblo blue. The paint is still drying. She'd found a donkey, a wise donkey, because he followed her everywhere. And I'm sure you've seen those pictures. She remains the most remarkable person I've ever met. She was my truest friend, as she was to so many of you here. And I don't have any happy, cuddly, warm words to end my remembrance of her. I will spend the rest of my life looking for her, and I'm sure that somewhere there's a note on that cosmic board that she's left me and that I'll find.
That was lovely. Now, we're going to hear, Eunice Miles, who's supposed to speak, frankly, could not bring herself to do so. And so, we're going to switch to Margaret's music, sung by Margaret's sister.
And I learned this song when I was very young. And during a time when Margaret and I played together in beautiful fields where we lived in Pennsylvania. We'll do our best. I am a poor wayfaring stranger traveling through this world of woe. But there's no sickness, no toil, no danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Joe. I'm only going. Dark clouds will gather on me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie out before me, and my eyes no more shall weep. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'd meet me when I come. I'm only going over Joe. I'm only going.
Now we'll hear from Margaret's other sisters through the voice of one.
It's Groundhog Day. Margaret would have loved it. I was having service on Groundhog Day. Phil says spring is going to be early, so she loved that too. I'm Hetty, and I'm one of her older sisters. I'm going to read for the two older sisters, Catherine Kuniraman and myself. I'm going to start with mine because I think it's a little less emotional. So Margaret and I are seven years apart, and because of the pattern of our lives, I didn't really get to know her very well until we were adults, and she was down here in DC and married to Stuart. I came down a lot for some things, and we spent a lot of time together talking, and our deepest point of connection was her art, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. Making art was the way Margaret connected to the person she really was, a naturist not in the sense of loving nudity, although maybe that too, but in the sense of passionately loving nature. The natural world was not only her muse, but also the place where she felt connection and belonging. For Margaret, summer was Chappaquiddick, no matter how many dead fly bodies in the rental house. She loved that place with a canvas and a brush loaded with oil paint. How do you make light? She thought out loud to me once as we regarded her favorite Chappie clamming pond. She'd push blues and greens around a canvas until they became personal landscapes of love, while sand, sun, and wind forced her to be present, living, and joyful. I didn't see when the paintings morphed into installations with an environmental theme until 2017, when I received an email for Earth Day titled, "The Butterflies Are Hung." In the attached photo, the room appears chock-a-block with handcrafted butterflies, monarchs and viceroys with wings arched, flying over brightly colored paper flowers. Hanging delicately on wire arms, I imagined the butterflies rocking in the breeze of each passing person. Was her work to remind us of their grace and also of their precarious existence? The magical monarch. It was as if Margaret had summoned them. The last time I saw Margaret was more than a year ago at the African American Museum. After we cruised through the galleries, delighting in the installations, she raced off to finish an installation for an opening. I want to say it was birds, to produce and hang a lot of birds. Her studio was to be the old schoolhouse on their property in San Ildefonso Pueblo. Was it nature or the desire to make her art that called her to New Mexico? Quote, "I had no idea that 4 acres was so much until we started clearing out the deadwood from the 2 heavily wooded acres along the river." She wrote me in full description of the property with its fruit trees and mountain lion. But like her winged creations, it was the sky about which she rhapsodized. Our bedroom has a wall of windows, and we wake to dawn over Black Mesa. Every sunset offers an ever-changing spectacle, and at night, the black, clear sky is a wonder of glimmering stars across the galaxy. I smiled to think of what her studio might have looked like, filled with inspirational birds, bones, and geology's finest rocks. She was just flexing her own muscle as an artist when her life ended. And when I think about how unfair it all is, I realize that even though she is gone, the spirit of her work on this earth endures. The butterfly has flown, but if we nurture its flowers, it will be back. I'm going to read now for Catherine Kuniraman. It's a little edited from her original that she sent me because I wanted to conform to the time constraints. A photo of Margaret with flowers reminds us of her dreams, her 2-week dream to share with her husband and children the best moments of our childhood on Martha's Vineyard. She was born on the vineyard. I was just a week away from my 13th birthday. As I lifted myself up for a first look, she held her head high and straight and looked around with big brown eyes on all of us. The following summer, just short of her first birthday, she picked herself up and with her very first steps walked into my arms.
"Margaret, I will give you 1 rupee for every minute you can sit on my lap quietly," a family friend offered. But she squirmed and laughed, full of stories, and never got a single rupee. "You'll know I'm asleep when I stop talking," she announced in the back of the car. In high school, the biology class was ordered to kill frogs and test the strength of their nerves after death. She refused. The teacher said she would fail the class. She argued, "If I need to know how to do this, I can read about it in a book." "What if you decide to be a doctor?" "Then I will kill a frog if I have to." She was sent to the headmaster and had it out with him all over again. He could not defeat her argument, and she did not kill any frogs. On the hills above Austin, Texas, where she moved after India, we walked, picking up fossils of shells that told of the ancient days when the sea covered these mountains. She might pick up a rock, look at it, and not finding it all that interesting, give it a toss. Then on the way back, she would feel sorry for it and pick it up again and take it home. So many rocks, shells, interesting pieces of this and that. Her flowers from DC that she dug up and brought to Santa Fe. I can still hear her voice. "Keiki, I'm going to be a lawyer." And "Keiki, I'm pregnant." She loved her husband and children with fierce enthusiasm. She filled their lives with all good things and supported all their interests. She shared herself to many people, family, friends, colleagues. In our last visit, just days before she left us all, we said all the things one sometimes regrets not having said. And I feel that this was the greatest gift of fate, that we had those days together. "Keiki, I really love you," she said. "I love you too," I answered. "You are all a sister should be."
A longtime friend. Think of him as the MC.
We took a lot of trips with Margaret, the Brown family, and I actually am wearing, she would make a t-shirt for every one of those trips. And I'm wearing the first one that we ever took back in 2001. Great young explorers. Among the many happy times our family shared over the years, from camping adventures Margaret organized to floating along the beach at Waysquee on her beloved Chappaquiddick. The memories I most cherish involve going to the Browns for an always fabulous home-cooked dinner at their home, usually a barbecue. So the night before Margaret and Stuart hit the road for New Mexico, we celebrated a Last Supper in Margaret's beloved garden. It was a beautiful August night. Margaret had set a table under the curly leaf tree she had planted years before, after the old one had died. I always referred to this tree as the white tree of Margaret's white tree of Gondor. We rustled up thick marbled New York sirloin steaks, seared to perfection on the old Weber grill sitting in the overgrowth. Our steaks red, rare, and juicy. Margaret's overcooked, leathery, and tough. Just the way she liked it. The garden, lush and overgrown and unkempt, may seem completely out of control to a stranger's inexperienced eye. But that night it was perfect and glorious for those of us fortunate enough to know and admire the natural border of all things Margaret. As guests in this Tenleytown oasis of flowers, art, music, and entertaining. Margaret made magical art happen everywhere she went. This was her gift and her genius. Votive candles illuminating our faces in the sunset's last glow. We raised our umbrella drinks and toasted the treasured times we had shared as families, and now are now grown children with happy lives of their own. We toasted all the summers spent on Chappaquiddick. We toasted the beautiful dinners and musical evenings, the roaring fires and singing carols by a holiday tree she had fashioned from old screen tinsel or other scavenged materials by Margaret. She was the world's greatest dumpster diver. We toasted watching really bad movies projected over the front door of their home, Stewart's do-it-yourself made screen. And we toasted to more good times ahead, just in a different place. I jokingly sang the tune from the Beverly Hillbillies, and we laughed. Come listen to a story about a man named Jeb. But the ballad of the Clampett family rang true for Margaret and Stewart. Like Jeb and Granny, Margaret and Stewart were off on a grand adventure. Pioneers heading off into the West. A truck and a car stuffed with their boxes and belongings, her precious paintings, family heirlooms, and more than likely many secretly stashed chocolate bars. So they loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools, movie stars. Well, maybe not Hollywood stars, but there were plenty of real stars in the sky. A mule named Miss Donkey who loves corn chips, and wonderful Pueblo neighbors with hearts as big as the land. Margaret and Stewart had surely struck gold. Their beautiful adobe home rested under the shadow of a magnificent mountain sacred to the local people. Their swimming pool, a magnificent river called the Rio Grande. Margaret could perform a lot of magic out there. It was late when Mary and I finally said goodbye. Margaret and Stewart had to be up early the next morning to hit the road. And as we descended those infamously steep, dark steps at 3816 Albemarle Street, we turned around and saw the two pioneers standing under the dim porch light, silhouetted against their old house, arms locked tightly around each other, babes and babes. That final ethereal image of our dearest friend Margaret will forever be imprinted in my mind. All of us can remember the wonderful, sweet Margaret that way. Her smile, her uniqueness as a human being, her magic. We will always remember that.
Laura Ferguson sang with Stewart in the choir at Pennsylvania, of which you will hear more soon.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming and to support me and my family. Margaret's colleagues hosted a grief counseling session, and the pastor said, when you share your joy, it doubles. And when you share your sorrow, the grief halves. And I found that to be so true. Each and every one of you has had my grief, my sorrow, and my loneliness. Each of you has doubled my love and the joy I have in the memory of Margaret. I especially want to thank Emily and Henry, Janine, Joyce and Martha for their tender care in putting all this together. Woody and Chris and Lizzie for coming to my aid. My brother taught me how to do it. First you throw a big party, and then you throw another party and only invite the women from the first. That's how I met and won my wife's heart. So I invited all my friends to invite all their friends to my party. Always painfully punctual, Margaret was the first to arrive. She was the beautiful Margaret in the white dress with wild hair who showed up an hour early and helped me chop vegetables. As years later she learned I described her when she found the notebook in which I took notes on all the girls. Early the next morning I started calling. Margaret was the first to answer her phone. Yes, she would have breakfast with me. Then we went to the Folklife Festival. Then we had lunch and went to a museum. After dinner, we went to a movie. After breakfast, the next day, we went to a party. She said she needed to know right then whether I was serious because she had no time to lose. I bought her 1,000 daffodils. She thought she'd win my heart by baking me her special cheesecake. Instead, I asked for more salad. I bought a house and I got down on my knees. She began to weep because she thought I'd hurt myself. I begged her to marry me, and we made love in every room. Margaret knew how to make a home. With Emily and then Henry, our tiny house was filled to bursting with the love and joy Margaret brought to every heart. 30 years into our first date, the neighbor's trees were overshadowing her garden. Margaret wanted to move to New Mexico where she could have a bigger garden and a studio. She may have finally painted enough pictures of her beloved Chappaquiddick. She yearned for the infinite, ever-changing beauty of New Mexico. The Margaret pose is bent over, looking down like a heron. Whether the most unusual stone or seashell, Margaret was always collecting. It might be road gravel. Then she was bent double. One time the greenish stones, another the brown. Within days of our arrival, she was constructing a mosaic on the driveway. A path to Susan's casita, another to the acequia and bogs. Every day she did more than I could do in 30. And in that way, she lived a very long life. Margaret was more exuberant and happier than ever. Every morning we'd awake as Venus and the moon rose beside Black Mesa. She'd glow in the orange and red, blue and yellow of the breaking of the dawn. Her smile was the new day. The sun on the mountains to the west, with the parade of Sherman's cows and Miss Donkey at the gate expecting her first apple. Jose and Donna's teepee to the north. An evening walk to the Arroyo or along the Rio, and a splendid full 360 sunset. She was my center, my everything. My babes, my Margaret. Every day, Margaret found at least one thing funny and wonderful, and it had to be shared. In that way, she touched everyone the better. In her funny black and white tights and t-shirt, she danced the black and white dance to make me smile. We walked hand in hand, cheek to cheek.
We will close with music. Thanks to the Temple Micah Choir, who will perform a song that Stuart can't hear without breaking it. Hallelujah. Please.
Hallelujah.
We're going to close with Meryl's favorite song. With Margaret's favorite song. I guess not drinking beforehand didn't help at all. Sorry.
Okay, I'm the Cantor Templeman. So we've been celebrating the exuberance of Margaret's life, and I was asked to sing this piece of music, which I believe came from some of her quieter moments. It was a lullaby that she sang to her children. Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Blue birds singing a song, nothing but bluebirds from now on. Never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right, noticing the days hurrying by. When you're in love, my, how they fly. Blue days, all of them gone, nothing but blue skies from now on. Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see.
We now come to the end of the formal part of our celebration, which means that it's now time for you to talk with each other. Stuart, Henry, and say anything except how sorry you are for their loss. And enjoy the food, and thank Martha and Joyce and Janine and the others who brought it all together.